The air was thick with tension. The flashing red and blue lights behind them seemed to slice through the night like a blade. Officer Nick Polovsky, Clint Eastwood, an experienced detective, was calm, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. His eyes scanned the dark, rain-slicked streets of Los Angeles, filled with the kind of chaos he had seen 1,000 times. But tonight was different. Beside him, his rookie partner, Officer David Ackerman, Charlie Sheen, was gripping the dashboard, his face a mixture of fear and excitement. This was his first real taste of the adrenaline-fueled world Nick had warned him about. Ackerman had seen his fair share of high-speed chases on TV, but this was nothing like he had imagined. "We're gonna catch him, right?" Ackerman asked, his voice shaking slightly, as the car they were chasing swerved violently, cutting through traffic like a bullet. Nick didn't answer immediately. His eyes were locked on the road ahead, calculating, anticipating the moves of the suspect in the car they were pursuing. There was something about the way the black sports car weaved in and out of traffic. It was too controlled, too methodical. Whoever was behind the wheel was no amateur. "He's not running because he's scared, kid," Nick said, his voice low and steady. "He's running because he thinks he can outsmart us, but he won't." The car ahead of them was moving at a breakneck speed, tearing through red lights, narrowly missing pedestrians, and taking sharp corners that left the tires screeching. The sound was deafening, but Nick's concentration remained unwavering. He had been in countless high-speed chases before, but this one felt different. The suspect wasn't just trying to escape, he was making a statement, and Nick couldn't help but admire the skill behind the wheel. "You ready for this?" Nick asked, glancing at Ackerman, who was white-knuckling the door handle, his face pale. Ackerman didn't respond. He was still trying to process the chaos happening around him. A few minutes ago, he had been in a patrol car, driving through the city, doing routine checks. Now, he was in the midst of a life-or-death chase with a criminal who was willing to do anything to get away. But Nick was in his element. His experience had taught him to read the road, to predict the movements of those who thought they could outrun the law. And right now, he could see it, a split second before it happened. "Hold on," Nick barked, slamming his foot down on the accelerator. The car leaped forward, matching the suspect's speed. The rookie barely had time to brace himself as they shot through another intersection, narrowly avoiding a head-on collision with a semi-truck. Horns blared, tires squealed, and the city around them blurred into a haze of lights and motion. "This isn't a game, Ackerman," Nick shouted, his eyes sharp and focused. "Keep your head in the game." Ackerman swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus, as the black car in front of them made another sharp turn, heading toward an industrial part of the city. They were losing ground, but Nick wasn't ready to let this one slip away. "Not this time," Nick muttered under his breath. The screech of tires on wet pavement echoed in the night as Nick and Ackerman followed the black sports car deeper into the industrial district. The narrow streets, lined with warehouses and flickering streetlights, were treacherous. The rain had turned the road slick, making every corner a gamble. Nick's eyes were fixed ahead, calculating their next move. He could see the suspect's taillights flashing in the distance, growing smaller with every second. The black car ahead was weaving through the streets with skill, but Nick knew this neighborhood better than anyone. He had spent years patrolling these very streets. The suspect wasn't going to lose him, not tonight. "Stay with me, kid," Nick muttered under his breath. His grip tightened on the steering wheel as he pushed the accelerator down further, the car roaring to life beneath him. Ackerman, still gripping the dashboard for dear life, swallowed hard. This was more than he had bargained for. He had read the training manuals, seen the crash simulations in the academy, but none of that prepared him for the real thing. He could feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. This was his first major chase, his first real test. "Do you see that?" Nick suddenly asked, his voice sharp. Ackerman followed Nick's gaze to the narrow alley ahead. It was a dead end, with a few dumpsters and a high fence blocking any escape. The black car ahead was racing toward it, showing no signs of slowing down. Is he really gonna try that?" Ackerman asked, his heart racing. Nick didn't respond. His focus was razor sharp. He knew exactly what was about to happen. The suspect wasn't running out of options. He was about to make a move. Nick slammed on the brakes just as the suspect did the unthinkable. He swerved hard to the left, heading toward the alleyway. The black car took the sharp corner with precision, its tires screeching in protest. But Nick was already on him, using the knowledge he had gained over years on the force. "Not today," Nick muttered, gritting his teeth. Nick's car slid sideways, barely making the turn, its tires screeching as the vehicle fought for grip on the rain-slick road. Ackerman let out a sharp gasp as the car in front of them disappeared into the alley. They were closing in, but Nick had a plan. "This is it, kid," Nick said, his voice steady but urgent. "Stay sharp." As they approached the alley's entrance, the black car was already skidding to a halt, its rear tires nearly colliding with a brick wall. The driver, realizing the dead end was inescapable, threw the car into reverse. It wasn't just a retreat, it was a calculated counter. He wasn't done yet. The driver was going to try to ram them. Ackerman's heart stopped as the black car reversed with lightning speed, aiming straight for their bumper. For a split second, he thought they were done. They had no escape. But Nick had already anticipated this. With a swift motion, Nick yanked the wheel, swinging the car to the right just as the black car collided with the empty space where they had been moments before. The impact sent a jolt through Nick's body, but he never hesitated. He floored the gas pedal. "Hold on," Nick shouted. In that moment, Ackerman could feel the danger closing in. The black car was still trying to box them in, but Nick was too experienced, too skilled. His car shot forward, hitting the narrow alley's corner just as the black car tried to reverse once more. Nick had the perfect angle. In a blur of speed and adrenaline, the two cars went head-to-head in a frantic dance of evasion and pursuit. Nick pulled out every trick he knew, anticipating the criminal's every move, using the alley's walls to block the escape routes. He wasn't just chasing a suspect. He was teaching the rookie a lesson he wouldn't forget. Just as it seemed like the chase might go another direction, the black car made a hard left, slamming into a fence that was too tightly packed to escape. The driver swerved once more, but it was too late. The damage had been done. Nick stopped the car just inches from the wrecked vehicle, his chest rising and falling with the quickness of his breath. The black car, now stalled, was a symbol of the chase's end. They had caught up. Ackerman exhaled sharply, barely able to comprehend what had just happened. He looked over at Nick, whose face was stone cold, eyes locked on the suspect's car. "Is that it?" Ackerman asked, voice shaking. Nick didn't answer. He simply reached for his radio. "Unit 23. We have the suspect. Requesting backup." The chase was over, but the lesson, that was just beginning. The flashing lights from the squad cars illuminated the alleyway like a scene out of a high-stakes movie. Nick Polovsky parked the car just behind the black sports car, Its rear bumper crumpled against the chain-link fence. The suspect's vehicle was now a trapped animal, but the man behind the wheel, whoever he was, wasn't going down without a fight. Nick opened the door of his car slowly, his boots hitting the wet pavement with a soft thud. There was a moment of eerie silence, broken only by the hiss of rain against metal. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, but he didn't allow it to control him. His mind was clear, focused on the task at hand. Ackerman, still shaken by the chase, unbuckled his seatbelt and followed Nick out of the car. His hands were trembling slightly, and he wasn't sure whether it was from the fear of the chase or the realization that he had just witnessed something far darker than he had ever imagined. This wasn't the textbook law enforcement he had studied. It was real, raw, and dangerous. The suspect was out of the car now, standing with his hands raised. He was tall, wearing a leather jacket, his face obscured by shadows from the streetlights above. The air was thick with tension, and even though the criminal wasn't running, there was an undeniable sense of impending danger. Nick approached the man first, his movements calm but measured. He had seen criminals like this before, cocky, defiant, thinking they could talk their way out of any situation. But Nick had learned long ago that words meant nothing when you were facing someone who was willing to risk everything. "Stay back, Ackerman," Nick ordered, his voice firm. "Let me handle this." Ackerman nodded, though his eyes were still glued to the suspect. He wasn't sure how to process everything that had just happened. The chase, the narrow escapes, the feeling of being inches away from death. Everything was a blur, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The suspect's eyes flicked toward Ackerman for a brief moment and then back to Nick. There was something in his gaze, resentment, maybe fear, but also a sense of inevitability. The man wasn't giving up. Not yet. Nick stopped just a few feet from him, his stance solid. He wasn't intimidated. He had been here before. "Name's Nick Polovsky," he said, his voice gravelly, not giving the man any room to argue. "And you just ran out of road." The suspect gritted his teeth, his hands still in the air. "You think you've won, huh? You and your rookie. You think you're better than me?" Nick didn't answer. He knew better than to waste time on petty taunts. Instead, he gestured for Ackerman to move in and secure the suspect's wrists with the handcuffs. Ackerman moved forward hesitantly, still trying to process the danger that had just unfolded. His hands shook as he reached for the suspect's wrists, but Nick's presence seemed to calm him. This was the moment, the culmination of the chase, the thrill of victory tempered by the cold weight of what they had just gone through. As Ackerman clamped the cuffs on the suspect, Nick glanced at him, his voice low. "You okay?" Ackerman nodded, though his face was pale. "Yeah, I think so. But that was something else." Nick looked at the suspect one last time. "You just don't get it, do you?" he said quietly. "It wasn't about you thinking you could get away. It was about me teaching him." He nodded toward Ackerman. "What it really means to be a cop. To never give up, no matter how tough it gets." As the backup unit arrived on the scene, Nick took a deep breath, finally allowing himself to relax, though only slightly. The chase had ended. The adrenaline had subsided. But the night had left a mark on him, and on Ackerman, too. "I guess that's the real rookie lesson," Ackerman said, his voice still shaky, but with a newfound respect in it. Nick glanced over at him and gave a small nod. "It's just the beginning, kid. The real lessons are out here, on the streets. They don't teach you that in the academy." The sirens grew louder as more officers arrived, securing the scene. The suspect would be taken in, processed, and eventually face the consequences of his actions. But for Nick and Ackerman, the night wasn't over. They still had to debrief, still had to process the chaos they'd just endured. For Ackerman, the rookie, the lesson was clear. This wasn't just about catching criminals. It was about survival. And tonight, they had survived. The night felt heavier than usual as Nick and Ackerman drove back to the station. The city around them was still buzzing with the usual late-night traffic, the hum of life continuing as if nothing had happened. But inside the patrol car, the silence between the two officers was deafening. Ackerman stared out of the window, his face lost in thought. The excitement of the chase was fading, replaced by a gnawing realization. He had seen what it took to be a cop tonight. The ruthlessness, the danger, the fine line between life and death. Nick, meanwhile, had his eyes on the road. He could feel the tension in the air, but he wasn't about to break the silence. He knew the rookie was processing everything, trying to make sense of it all. He remembered what it was like when he was in Ackerman's shoes, fresh out of the academy, eager to prove himself, but unprepared for the real world. "Hey," Nick finally spoke, his voice low. "You good?" Ackerman took a deep breath before replying, his eyes still focused on the passing streetlights. "I don't know. That was intense, man. I've trained for this stuff, but nothing prepares you for actually being in it. I mean, I thought I was ready, but I don't know if I can shake the feeling." Nick nodded. He understood. The rookie wasn't the first to feel this way, and he wouldn't be the last. In this line of work, they all learned eventually that the badge wasn't just a symbol of authority. It was a reminder of the sacrifices they made, the dangers they faced, and the weight they carried. "That's the job, kid," Nick said, his voice steady but filled with experience. "You think you're ready, but you're never really ready. Every day you put on this uniform, you're walking a tightrope. And the moment you forget that, the moment you think you've got it figured out, that's when you're in trouble." Ackerman absorbed his words, turning them over in his mind. "I've always wanted to make a difference, but now I see what it takes. It's not just about chasing bad guys and making arrests. It's about dealing with the aftermath, the stuff that doesn't go away when the sirens stop." Nick let the words hang in the air for a moment, knowing that the rookie was beginning to understand the reality of their job. It wasn't just about the glory moments of catching criminals or saving the day. It was about the nights like tonight, when you had to look at yourself in the mirror and ask if you were really cut out for the job. "You'll get used to it," Nick said, though there was no certainty in his tone. "Eventually. But it'll never get easy. The day it gets easy is the day you need to start questioning whether you're in the right line of work." Ackerman nodded, taking the advice to heart. He wasn't sure if he could get used to the constant pressure, but he knew one thing. He wasn't ready to quit. Not now. Not after everything he had seen and done tonight. He had made it through the chase. He had survived the chaos. And for now, that was enough. As they approached the station, Nick glanced over at Ackerman, his eyes softening for a brief moment. "Look, kid, you did good tonight. You stayed in the game. You did exactly what you were trained to do. That's all I could ask for." Ackerman gave a small, appreciative smile. "Thanks, Nick. It means a lot coming from you." Nick's lips twitched upward in a rare smile, though it was short-lived. "Don't get too sentimental. You've still got a lot to learn." As they pulled into the station parking lot, the weight of the night was still heavy, But the rookie had taken his first step into the real world of law enforcement. It wasn't the Hollywood version he had imagined. There were no perfect victories, no clear-cut endings. There were only moments like this, when you had to take a breath, process the chaos, and prepare for whatever came next. Nick and Ackerman got out of the car and walked toward the station entrance, the sound of their boots echoing in the empty lot. There was no fanfare, no crowd waiting to applaud them, just two cops walking back to do their jobs. For Nick, it was just another night. But for Ackerman, it was the beginning of something much bigger. The sound of the door closing behind them echoed through the quiet hallway of the station. The hustle and bustle of the night shift had died down, with officers going over reports and debriefing. But for Nick and Ackerman, the events of the night lingered in the air like a heavy fog. Nick had led the way into the locker room, his mind still sharp from the chase. But the exhaustion was starting to set in. He had been through it all, the high-speed chases, the gunfights, the arrests. But tonight, there had been something different. Maybe it was the rookie beside him, still processing the thrill and fear of their first real chase together. Or maybe it was the constant reminder that no matter how many years you had on the force, you were never truly done learning. Ackerman sat down on a bench, removing his boots slowly. His face was still pale, his eyes distant, as though the weight of the chase had yet to fully lift. Nick could see the conflict in him, the desire to prove himself, but also the realization that being a cop was never just about the glory of a successful chase. It was about the toll it took on you, physically and mentally. "You know," Ackerman said after a long pause, his voice still quiet, "when I joined the force, I thought it was all about the action, the chase, the arrest, the moments of victory. But tonight, it was different. I don't know if I'm ready for all of it." Nick turned to face him, his expression serious, but there was a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. You never truly get ready for it. Some things you can't prepare for, no matter how much you train. The real world is messier than anything you'll ever see in a classroom. Ackerman nodded, his eyes flicking to the door, as if hoping the chaos of the night would disappear with the click of a switch. "I think I understand now. It's not just about being fast or strong. It's about making decisions in the heat of the moment, and living with them." Nick smiled faintly, sitting down across from him. "Exactly. You'll make mistakes. I still do. But it's how you learn from them that counts." There was a long pause as the two men sat in the quiet of the locker room, the weight of the night still pressing down on them. Nick knew what Ackerman was going through. He had been there once, young, eager, thinking he could change the world. But reality had a way of tempering those dreams. "You did good tonight," Nick said finally, breaking the silence. "You kept your head in the game. You didn't freeze. That's what counts." Ackerman looked up, meeting his eyes, a sense of relief washing over him. It wasn't much, but it was enough for him to realize that maybe he wasn't as far from ready as he had originally thought. "Thanks," Ackerman replied, his voice steady for the first time all night. "I'm starting to see that being a cop isn't about the chase. It's about keeping your head straight when everything around you is spinning. It's about being there for the people who need you, and knowing when to let go." Nick stood up,